session at this hall, which is a research dialogue, the first research dialogue of the day. And this will be moderated by Dr. Shivkumar Kalyanaraman, who is the CEO of ANRF. And the speakers for this will be Dr. Archana Sharma, Professor Alison Noble, Professor Neil Lawrence, Dr. Bonnie Kruft, Professor Priya Donti, and Dr. Pushmeet Kohli. So I welcome everybody on stage, and over to you, Shiv.
Good morning. It says time's up already. Maybe it's for the last one. Good morning, everyone. How are you feeling today? All good? Okay. So it's my privilege to host this panel for you. We have the who's who of folks doing things in AI for science and engineering. One of the exciting things, and many leaders have told us that one of the biggest contributions that AI will do for the society is transform how science is done and transform the acceleration of the impact of science. So I look forward to a wonderful dialogue here. We have about 85 minutes, and in terms of the format, we'll keep it super simple and conversational, if that's okay. I will request each of our panelists in order here to give an opening statement and specifically reflect on one is what they're doing and what they see in terms of the acceleration to impact. This conference is about impact as a theme, this particular panel is AI as a catalyst. So a catalyst accelerates, what can AI do to accelerate discovery, both fundamental discoveries as well as accelerate the conversion of science and the translation of science towards impact. And also where, and since we have a lot of young audience, I will request the panelists to also reflect on, what does it mean for the younger generation here, as well as what they can do to contribute. And since we are in the country of India, what can India do to contribute as well? What is the opportunity and potential? There is a lot of discussion about risks, and I would like to bias this conversation a lot more on opportunities, and of course, please feel free to balance that with risk. And then, what can we all do to being a positive force and science as a positive force for transformation? Okay, these are the few thoughts I have, but without any further ado, I thought I'll start off by saying, how can AI help us win a Nobel Prize? But, but I'll keep it simpler than that. Without further ado, Bonnie.
Can everyone hear me okay? It sounds like it can. I'm Bonnie Kruft. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be among such esteemed colleagues, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. So I lead a team that focuses on AI for science at Microsoft Research. We focus on two main things, molecules and materials. So specifically, how can AI enable the discovery of new novel molecules and materials? And the motivation for that is pretty simple. The limits to discovery really doesn't come down to imagination. It comes down to the speed at which and the depth at which and scale to which we could explore. So our hypothesis is that we can use AI as a fast surrogate for some of the very expensive, slow steps within the scientific process. So oftentimes we have to compute the properties of molecules and materials. That takes extensive amount of compute, time, experience, domain knowledge, and experiment is even more expensive. So what ends up happening is the scientists are limited to a smaller space to which they could actually explore. So if we can use AI, we can open up opportunities to find novel molecules and materials that can help to solve some of the world's greatest challenges today. Things like new medicines for diseases that we haven't been able to treat yet, solutions to the energy and climate crisis, new materials for sustainability, and many, many more. So I'm very excited to be here, especially be a part of this event in India. You asked about how India can take part. I do think very few places in the world have as much scale and talent as India. This is a nation of doers, and so I think there's an opportunity here for India to be a part of this, for the young people, for the massive amount of talent in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, computer science, to get involved and be part of the scientific loop. So ultimately, the way that we accelerate scientific discovery is by bringing AI to help us find the new opportunities to explore more expansive space of discovery and have India be a part of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Alison Noble, and I think I can build a little bit on what you're saying. I work in healthcare AI, and that's a very diverse topic, so I can talk about that for probably the whole day and beyond. And some of it, as we've heard, and you've just mentioned, the advances in AI are really helping in the discovery side. But there are some other areas. I work much closer at the interface working with clinicians. And there are some early papers coming out that are really trying to get people to think of doing medicine in different ways. And by that I mean taking large sets of data that are taken of patients. Some of that will be imaging, which is my background. Some of it's then following those patients. But then it's using thousands and thousands of examples of that to be able to maybe discover new ways that we can manage conditions. And why this is so important is a lot of medicine has been driven by what you're able to measure at the time. In imaging, it's what you see in an image. And with AI now, you can discover the hidden patterns in multimodal data that might suggest totally new ways of managing patients. And this is still the future, though, because even if you've got a discovery, that translation into practice takes a lot of time and effort. And this is why when we talk about some of the excitement of AI, discovering a new algorithm, that's only the beginning. That's the beginning of the journey of getting that model into practice. And in medicine, that's a very complex process. So some of my research is actually thinking more about that, is having developed a model. I work with ultrasound, so we've been working for many years on how you can make ultrasound an easier technology to use. You need to make it easier because humans can't recognize the patterns in ultrasound. So what we've been working on is both how you recognize patterns but with AI that go beyond what humans can see. For example, estimating the gestational age of a fetus from a scan, you traditionally fit a circle or you fit a line, having captured an image. But actually, if you want to date a pregnancy, you can do it as well, if not better, at certain points in pregnancy if you pose it as a pattern recognition problems, because the acoustic patterns will recognize elements of fetal development that humans can't actually see by eye. So there are all these opportunities, but this then gets into the debate of you now have tools where humans work with AI. And the early papers in healthcare were very much trying to show that you could automate processes and show that AI was as good as a radiologist, and radiologists were really scared about this, that they would lose their jobs. But we've moved on from that now, because what you realize is you can automate certain tasks, but a lot of the time you need humans working with AI. And then you get into all the socio-technical issues of how do you understand where a human will make a better decision with AI or not? Evidence out there at the moment, very mixed, that for certain tasks, AI helps. In other tasks, it doesn't help. And this, to me, is really important that we have a lot more research in this area to really understand this area. It's often called human-AI collaboration. At that point, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Pushmeet, please.
Hi. So, I'm Pushmeet. I lead the Science and Strategic Initiatives Unit at Google DeepMind. And the mission of the organization of Google DeepMind is to build AI responsibly to benefit humanity. And when we think about that last part of the mission statement, which is benefit humanity, what does that actually entail? When we talk about AI is not just a monolithic sort of concept. If you think about what is even intelligence, there are different forms of intelligence. There is common intelligence that allows us to solve tasks like image understanding. There is expert level intelligence, where some humans have become experts in solving incredibly hard challenges, being able to solve and find proofs of immense challenging maths problems, or being able to diagnose a disease by learning about medicine, or by thinking about sort of how should a legal contract be specified. So that's expert level intelligence. And then there is another form of intelligence which goes beyond human competencies, where there is no human today which can solve that particular task. An example of it is the protein folding problem, where you are given a sequence of a protein and you are asked, can you tell me the structure? No single human, just by reflecting on that sequence of amino acids which constitute a protein, can tell you what is the 3D shape. And that's superhuman level intelligence. So when we think about the impact that AI is going to have, we have to think about all these different competencies. The first competency of common intelligence, it will make intelligence much cheaper, much more available, and much faster. On the expert level intelligence, it will democratize expertise. So look at a country like India, where it has challenges in terms of providing healthcare, high quality healthcare, to the 1.4 billion people in the country. Not everyone has access to the high quality medical sort of healthcare needs that are available to sort of a privileged few. So can we make sure that every single person on the planet has access to that deep intelligence? So that's the promise of AI at the expert level. My own work is mostly focused on the superhuman sort of part. And this is where I think the greatest promise of AI lies. If we think about ourselves as a species, as humans, we have come a long way in our understanding of nature and reality. But if you think about the last few years and reflect on what has happened, think about climate change, think about the COVID pandemic, that really shows us how little we know of nature. Once the virus sort of evolved or sort of came and generated these sequences, and the whole world had to stop. That's essentially the limit of human intelligence. We have so much more to learn, which is why we need to have AI to solve these grand challenges of understanding what proteins look like, how cells work, how organisms work, right? That's the promise of AI for biology. In material science, as Bonnie was mentioning, that if you think about human civilization, we teach history in school in terms of how humans were using materials. We went from the Stone Age to the Iron Age to the Bronze Age, and depending on who you ask, we are living through the Silicon Age or the Plastic Age. But it tells you how important materials are to humanity. Like each material gives us a superpower, which completely transforms civilization's abilities to do certain things. So can you imagine what will be the new magical materials of the future? And how will we invent them? And that's where we need this superhuman intelligence to really think about these amazing materials like room temperature superconductors, which can sort of open up new advances in how we transform energy, can come up with a high sort of magnetic field for fusion reactors, give us abundant sources of energy. That is the promise of AI. So yes, there is a sort of, when we talk about AI, we think about all the economic impact that will happen, and there will be many changes, but there's a lot of positive things to look up to. This will all need to happen with a sense of responsibility. And like with regards to India, I think, and not just India, but across the world, I think one of the very important elements is that we really need to make sure that people understand the strengths of this technology, but more importantly, they also understand the weaknesses of this technology. Because if you are not able to understand the weaknesses of the technology, you will basically have a Formula 1 car, but you will not know how to drive it and you will crash. So access and understanding, I think, are the key elements that are needed not only for India, but for the entire world, and especially for the global south. We really need to make sure that people have access, they understand how the technology is shaping up, what are its weaknesses, and how can they use it responsibly. So I'll stop.
Thank you, Pushmeet. Archana? Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello. So namaste, everyone. I see that there are many, many young people here around the age of 30, 35, and they must be wondering, what are these people talking about AI? You know, it's us, you know, who know about it. And I've seen some posts like that on social media. It's all right. So when I was your age, I was fortunate to be landing in the laboratory where the first website was released. And that was www.cern.ch. How many of you have heard about the Higgs boson? Oh, great, wonderful. Now, how many of you know that it took 30 years to build the machine? The R&D for the accelerator that you mentioned, you know, superconducting accelerators, that took 10 years to build it, and then another 2-3 years to commission and run it. The algorithms that were needed to look for the Higgs boson, for which the probability was 1 in a billion collisions. We needed data 2,000 trillion collisions, proton collisions, right? So the algorithm making and the searching for anomalies in the data has been the forte of scientists working together. So the message here really for all of us is collaboration. And all the guardrailing will come from collaboration. Understanding the troubles that are coming in front of us, we have actually gone through the cycles, as you just mentioned also. So the 30 years in which I have seen from paper to the large experiments which cost us more than $1 billion each, and then the operations that also cost same amount per year. We need to be responsible. We need how responsibly we'll be able to take this forward. And AI is another challenge that is in front of us now. In the past, it was about looking at how to deploy the web. And the web itself was the precursor, I would say, to a lot of domain-related advances that you see in every possible domain of which we've already heard. We've heard healthcare, materials. COVID came as a bolt from the blue, and you know, everybody stopped to think a bit on how to take this forward responsibly. And we can't just take technology and science and research and then put it back in the drawer once we finish the problem. You know, we have to continue, and we could pick up the challenge of COVID because there were tools, and because there was science of understanding, and because there was funding that was made available in good time by the governments all over the world, so that we could all be prepared. But I would still underline that the bottom line was collaboration. And why do I say that? Because I am one of those 10,000 scientists who was involved in the discovery of the Higgs boson. And so 1 upon 10,000 of the Science Breakthrough Prize of 2024 is also, I can say, one of my accolades. But next generation will not be 10,000. It will be, several factors, several orders of magnitude, which means the whole world is going to work together. And particularly for the Global South, think about it that every classroom or every university or institution and our premier institutions in the country for that matter, who are already doing cutting edge work. When we started working for the LHC, we did not know the solution. We did not know whether we'll get there. We did not know whether we will be able to solve the technical problems, really technical problems, because 27 kilometers of the Large Hadron Collider, the protons cross the border from Switzerland to France 40 million times a second. So cross-border understanding is very important. Not only in the protons who go without passports, but also within the governments, and also, of course, how to deploy the understanding and how to deploy the information, and of course, the beams match with sub-micron precision. So I think that here is an opportunity for us to look at our societal issues that we have in our country and in the world, in fact, for that matter, if we look at the larger picture, the climate change, environment, pollution in our country, we have some thoughts on how to solve them. And I think we have the tools with all the precursors of AI, if we look at what we have done in the past, that we can deploy for solving these issues. And I would love to see all those institutions involved in the solving of these kinds of issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana. Neil, over to you.
Well, that's such great contributions so far already. So it's also showing sort of how vast the topic it is. So when we think about science, Bonnie's sort of emphasized the importance of discovery. Alison's talked about the importance of the human-machine collaboration. Pushmeet's talked about the superhuman capabilities. And, of course, Archana's talked about how we all have to work together and collaborate to create science. And it reminds me of something that I think artificial intelligence, or the notion of it, which I think the word is already problematic. I agree with Wendy that the notion of AGI is deeply problematic because intelligence is very personal, it's very human. And I think when we think of India, and actually Eastern cultures in general, my sense is you have a much more sophisticated understanding of intelligence because the religions in the East tend to accept different forms of deity that express different aspects of humanity in a way that religions in the West don't. So I think some of the hang-ups we have in the West you don't have here, and I think that's really exciting. But then what does it do? I think, to me, the AI itself gives us a place to stand and reflect on ourselves, reflect on who we are and our institutions. So when we think about doing that in science, I think we can see some enormous opportunities for impact in India and for the audience. And I want to sort of step back to people who've talked about the philosophy of science, like Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and Popper, Conjectures and Refutations. Because science isn't just about discovery, it's about understanding and what it means for us to understand, but not just us as individuals, us as institutions. And you can see in a number of ways we're failing. We're failing when not everyone understands the Higgs boson and why it's important to spend $1 billion on such experiments. And I think one of the ways we're failing can be seen right at the heart of what Thomas Kuhn tells us. He tells us that the paradigm of science, he's writing in the 1960s, is stored in textbooks. And he talks about normal science as solving puzzles within that paradigm. And then he talks about paradigm-shifting science, so big discoveries like Einstein that change the way we think about the world around us. But there's a fundamental problem here. Nowadays, the paradigm of science is not stored in textbooks. It's stored in machines. And some of those machines are storing simulations and complex ideas that we don't have individual access to. Now, I got into this field sort of 25 years ago because I was an academic who wanted to apply machine learning, and it seemed to be science was a very sensible place because science is all about academia. Now, what I see as the opportunity here is increasingly people have become isolated from the science. And I think particularly with large language models as tools, there's an enormous opportunity to allow people to get back in contact with that and to re-access science in the same way that a student 100 years ago would be accessing science through textbooks, that you can access all that science stored up in the machine through these large language models. And I hope that that's going to be a revolution in science where we see again, going back to, I think, some of the hopes at independence for India, the foundation of the IIT, the foundation of the science institutes, that India was going to be a partner in those scientific discoveries, as it has been, but not enough of it happening here. Too much of it through diaspora, too much of it not accessible because the technology for science has become removed from the place where the creative people are. And I really hope we can see that change.
Thank you, Neil. Priya, your opening comments.
Right. Yeah, so thank you so much. So my name is Priya Donti. I am an assistant professor at MIT, as well as a co-founder and chair of a nonprofit called Climate Change AI. And my angle on this topic of AI for science and engineering is more from the engineering side and specifically thinking about the power grid. So the power grid is something that I think many sort of take for granted, right? We switch on a light, and unless there's a planned or unplanned outage, hopefully the light will come on. And yet behind that, it's a very complicated system. It's a system where the amount of power that is being produced and put into the power grid has to exactly equal the amount that is being consumed on the power grid at every single moment in time. And this is incredibly complex because, first of all, we have a lot of variation in how much demand is on the grid at any given time. And as we aim to work towards kind of decarbonizing power grids or moving to more distributed forms of power, we also have to deal with the fact that the amount of supply we have, solar and wind, for example, varies based on the weather. So how do we manage this kind of increasingly complex system? We've historically done this using kind of optimization, electrical engineering, controls, paradigms where we actually write down explicitly the sets of equations that we want to solve over on the system and solve them. But the challenge is that this paradigm is not sufficiently scalable. It's much too slow to solve the problems we actually need to solve to coordinate the power grid. And so this is where AI can potentially play a role in terms of both helping us reduce the uncertainty of quantities like demand and renewable energy by helping us to forecast these quantities more effectively. Then given those forecasts, to help us to actually control the different devices on the power grid, our power generators, our batteries, our inverters, in ways that are more scalable. So I think earlier this concept of surrogate modeling came up also in one of the other panelists' remarks. So how do we actually use AI to learn fast approximations to some of the models that are used, optimization models that are used on the power grid? And then third, how do we actually envision new paradigms of managing this power system? Historically, because of the power generators were big, were centralized, there's been a very centralized way of managing the power grid, but kind of AI and reinforcement learning and control technologies kind of allow us to envision a power grid that's more dynamic, that's more distributed, where there's more kind of localized control. And so these are some places that I think AI can play a really useful role. What comes up, though, when designing AI for the power grid is that even though there are commonalities with other areas, so some of these terms I've used around kind of control and optimization, they come up in other scientific fields, they come up in robotics, but sometimes the notion of, let's say, kind of physical feasibility, the notion of safety, the notion of interpretability that we need on these systems is sometimes very or subtly different from what that means in other scientific areas. So there's some aspect of the fact that the way we design AI for these systems often looks a bit different than the way we design it for other systems. So my own research group, for example, we develop ways to kind of write down the equations associated with power grids and actually embed them into the way we design machine learning models, into the way we kind of design neural network layers. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that as we think about kind of the role of, let's say, India in kind of developing AI, I think it's important to recognize that the way we develop AI is deeply contextual when it comes to both what problem we're trying to solve, kind of the way that our models look different because we're designing for different requirements, and also depending on where we are trying to solve that problem. For example, electricity demand forecasting is a problem that's considered kind of solved in the US context because we have pretty steady electricity demand, barring recent data center growth, in many places. And so data about kind of how electricity demand looked last summer will reflect roughly what electricity demand looks like this summer. In the Indian context, where in that 1 year's period of time, you'd have had kind of many more buildings put onto many more buildings built, kind of many more air conditioning systems installed, your data looks different. And so, whereas kind of people developing time series forecasting algorithms in the US wouldn't have to think about what's called distribution shift in machine learning, the idea that kind of this underlying situation is changing, people innovating on that in the Indian context would. And so I think that kind of where I kind of hope that India kind of plays a role here is in recognizing that I think a lot of the most interesting innovation comes from a bottom-up understanding of what the problems are on the ground and a recognition that even scientific and technical challenges can look fundamentally contextually different in different places. And that doesn't mean there isn't the capability to sort of share knowledge and collaborate between different places. Fundamentally, for example, power grids are governed by the same physics in different places, so there's clearly some shared knowledge. But I think this paradigm of kind of developing AI needs to come from ground-up understanding and then collaboration that joins that knowledge, rather than sort of a top-down paradigm where kind of a small set of people develop models and then we quote-unquote specialize after the fact. And as a result, presumably miss, I think, a lot of the richness that we could have incorporated if we had empowered more people to contribute to this paradigm of AI. So I think this comes to collaboration, and I think basically this goes well beyond access to kind of ensuring that many people are upskilled and educated and able to contribute to the ecosystem such that the models are built using their knowledge, their context from the get-go.
Thank you, Priya. I want to bring this conversation back to what Feifei started off with. She started off with 540 million years back and talked about vision. I mean, I don't want to go that far. We could start from, say, the Renaissance period when science really took off and we moved away from darker ages towards the more Enlightenment, the more critical thinking, more reasoning, the scientific method, hypothesis, leading to measurement and then building theories and so on. So in those periods, there were many instruments that came around. You had the telescope, you had the microscope, so you could see into the stars, you could see into smaller things. But what is this AI thing? How do I even make sense of how does it fit within the paradigms of instruments like telescopes, microscopes? I want you to, each one of you, to put yourself in the shoes of the scientist here or the engineer here or the young person here who wants to be a scientist or an engineer. And maybe if you can also concretize it with one of the things you're doing, Bonnie, with the wonderful things that you're doing in your organization and each one of you in your things, and then try to translate for them how can I take this concrete technology or the models and things you're building, and then how does it translate to, hey, if I'm a scientist, how do I use the stuff you're talking about? How do I even mentally map it to what I understand of a telescope, microscope, or other sorts of instruments? And how's my life going to change? How does my life as a scientist or an engineer going to change? If you wouldn't mind taking that dialogue and doing one more wave of things, we'll do a couple of waves and then we'll come back to completely open conversation, if that's okay. Bonnie, I can put you on the spot. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. It's a great question. I think if you think about the space of discovery, there's discovery and there's acceleration. And I think the two are very complementary, right? If we can collapse and accelerate the time it takes to discover new molecules and materials, that'll help solve and also give access to a wider space of molecules, materials, proteins available to us. So one of the ways that we're working in the biology space is around protein dynamics. So of course we can use things like AlphaFold to help us predict the structure of a protein, but of course that's not the end of the story. We also need to understand the function and the dynamics of that protein. So one way in which you, young people, experienced scientists, wherever, can help to bring solutions to new problems is to think about how we can define and use AI to look at the dynamics and the functions of biology. Once we understand that, we can design new medicines to treat diseases and many more. Making these available to students and to researchers around the world is all part of what we're trying to do. And I think it's really important to get involved in the validation of that. So building a model in isolation really is just a curiosity, right? So what we really need to do is see how these models can be embedded directly into the scientific loop. And so I think that's one way in which the community can get involved. It's not just about training the models, making very fast and accurate models. It's about actually how it gets integrated into the systems, how it actually gets involved, how it actually gets used. How does that output from the model become something that a scientist, a domain expert, can make a decision on? And that's when we're going to start to see the real impact of AI across biology and medicine. Similarly with materials, there's an astronomical number of possible materials in the universe, and we have only explored a tiny fraction of them. If we can use generative AI to explore new novel materials, and then also use AI as a surrogate to emulate the properties of those materials, are we able to find materials that can help solve some of the challenges that we have today? In particular in India, whether it's solving sustainability or energy, how can we make access to new materials and again build that into the scientific discovery loop? Build that into going from hypothesis to testing to actually having something real to use and impact the world.
Thank you so much.
So for me, AI is just a tool, always has been. There was science prior to AI as well. And I guess for me, I've always approached my work as you start by identifying the need. So when you say, do I need a new instrument? In my case, we need better ultrasound devices. You start with that. Then you might be thinking about how you would then bring in the AI, understanding current capabilities, evaluate it, understand its limitations, and build on that as well. But an important part of any development, as an engineer, this is the way I think, is you also bring in other people who can work with you on solving some of those problems. So if you work with clinicians, I work with people who do the ultrasound scans, the sonographers are there from day one. They're the ones who gather the data that helps us build the model. The engineers are the ones who build the models. We evaluate together and we iterate and improve. And I think that's the important thing. And I think for me the exciting thing about now is everything has becoming very interdisciplinary. When I started out, it was computer scientists playing with whatever data was available. Then we moved on to want the clinicians to acquire data in everyday practice. Much more interesting things you can do with that. And then try and predict if they modified their practice, how would they be able to make better decisions. So partly the clinicians, and for a few years I was working with them. Now I'm working with experimental psychologists. And the importance of doing that opens up a whole new area, a whole new definition of what they consider to be academic work, science, how they publish, all the things that come with that. But they're very important because they understand if you put a tool in the hand of a human, how does that, can the human use it? Does the tool behave in the way it did in the lab? But how does it change, coming back to what you started with, how does it change reasoning and human behavior? And we need all of this to be able to understand, can we translate AI into everything useful? So for those of you out there who are computer scientists, who do you know who are your end users of what you're doing? What is the end use of what you're doing? And who have you talked in experimental psychology and other parts of social science about the human aspects of what you're developing? This is the future. It's also starting to happen now, and it's incredibly exciting. So I ask you to get away from your computer and go and talk to other people in science who are trying to make things happen.
Oh, what a wonderful message. Get away from your computer, that's wonderful. Please, Pushmeet.
I think I agree with Alison that it's really important to understand the problem deeply. Now, going back to the question of what is AI for, where can it make a difference? So AI systems have this amazing sort of ability to scale reasoning. So there are two sort of ways I've seen these systems really sort of shine on scientific and engineering tasks. One is where they are able to extract meaning or extract patterns from data that will, from a perspective of a single human mind, it's impossible to get to understand or even sort of see that data. So look at the amount of data that we as a scientific community are collecting about all areas of science. We saw Archana talk about the amount of data that CERN collected from the from the LHC. There was that is a huge amount of data. Similar sort of data sets are being collected in genomics. We are sort of sequencing across the world at a scale which has been unprecedented. We have, with regards to the protein folding problem, we were able to sequence these proteins and find their 3D structure for hundreds of thousands of proteins, right? That was a lot of data, but it was still scratching the surface for truly understanding the problem. And what machine learning systems like AlphaFold have been able to do is extract meaning from that data and come up with sort of patterns to really predict the future. So from those 150,000 proteins, 3D structure of those proteins, it is now able to generalize to almost every protein on the planet, right? 250 million. And that's where the real democratization also comes in, that once it has extracted that meaning and is able to predict the 3D structure from the sequences, now every sort of scientist, whether they are working in Latin America or South Africa, whether they are working on a neglected tropical disease, whether they are sort of developing an enzyme for decomposing plastics, they can use it on at a click of a button. Right? So that democratization power of AI systems, that they can be used at will, and they have been able to extract this meaning, is very powerful. The second way in which I have sort of seen this is the ability to search. So how many of you sort of remember that AlphaGo match with Lee et al.? How many? Yeah, a lot of you have seen that sort of that game. I was seeing that game, and Move 37 happened, and all the commentators were like, oh yeah, this is a hallucination. The model made a silly mistake, haha. And then as the game proceeded, they were like, wow, that was a genius move. That rewrote the whole theory of Go. So what are those Move 37s in science? And we are seeing those Move 37s in science. Like we have a system, Alpha Evolve, and what it has been able to do is basically we have used it on different problems in computer science and in optimization, and we have figured out that it is able to discover new algorithms for very, very fundamental problems like matrix multiplication. Imagine matrix multiplication, like we teach it in sort of school, and it's the basic building block of all of sort of even AI, right? Neural networks are basically matrix multiplication. And yet we did not know what is the lower bound in terms of number of multiplications that are required to multiply two matrices. And what a system like Alpha Evolve and these search-based systems are able to do is find these new algorithms that really expand what scientists know about the problem. So it's a great example of the scale of reasoning abilities of these systems. And that's where the real sort of power comes in.
Yeah, thank you, that's amazing. Please, Archana.
Thank you. I mean, I'm the only person here who's not really working on AI. But there are, I think all of us are working on AI because either we are the product or we are the user. because you get up in the morning and your phone is automatically telling you what to do and take your blood pressure, or dimming the lights, driving us through the traffic. So we are in this ambient AI which is now becoming reality. And then there is the proactive AI which we think about. And for that, I think we are pretty much in a space where we have to see who is defining those algorithms. So that's very important, I would say. At CERN, you mentioned about the data, I mentioned about the data already, and we are not done yet. We are now multiplying the data, and we are upgrading the collider, where we will have 10 times more luminosity, which means that in 1 year, we will be able to collect all the data collected in the last 15 years. So now is a challenge for all you experts here on AI who want to help us in sifting through that data and taking us towards dark matter and dark energy that is, not out there yet. Nevertheless, I feel that for us, scale is very important for the experiments, and then inclusion is very important, which was already mentioned earlier. I would say that every student is an Einstein, just needs to find the right trigger. And coming from high energy physics, triggers we make at the microsecond, nanosecond level at every collision. So this has to translate into society. And I think if we can do that, we've been doing it in iterations, we've been doing it incrementally over the last 20 years, 25 years. We've been giving out and, collaborating with meteorology organizations at CERN, in Geneva. Like the United Nations has a separate UNOSAT, which is the United Nations Organization for Satellite Imagery. And they use most of the tools that we have developed to look for forecasting the weather, and to look at monitoring as well, and to look for sending help and assistance where there are issues on weather or any kind of natural disasters. So UNHCR is using, that is the High Commission of Refugees, they are also using algorithms that are coming out from CERN. So I see the interdisciplinarity, not only of the subject, but also of the object of what we want to do. And definition of that is very important. And certainly we can't leave that to AI to decide what we want to do as a race, human beings. Thank you.
Thank you. So Neil, just to Professor, so you've written a wonderful book, and you've mentioned in several of your public comments about how we should understand ourselves better in this world of AI. If you could also weave that into your comments, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And obviously the answer is AI as a catalyst, because that's the name of the session. But how is AI a catalyst, and how does that relate to us as individuals? Well, first, a quick story that comes from the Renaissance, the story of the discovery of Ceres, which took place in Sicily by a very isolated scientist making observations, and was only published in April, by which time this is a dwarf planet. It was thought to be a main planet at the time, in 1801. It was lost. Now, the planet had been lost, and yet it was recovered. It was recovered because the data was made available, and a young mathematician by the name of Carl Friedrich Gauss. People know how old he was? 23. 23. Yeah, so 23 years old, and he was able to read in a journal that was published the data at the time. So it's 1801, so there's no canals or anything like that. That the information is moving across Europe, and people are attacking it as a problem. And then the planet was recovered a year later in another observatory institute. So they're using tools, they're using telescopes, but they're also, the main thing, and the key thing that AI is providing, and it's shifting, and why this is important to the individual, is also present in a very odd thing on this stage. We have Microsoft and Google talking about science, in terms of materials and in terms of creation of biology. Well, what's going on there? They're information technology companies. So it's an information technology, right? And it goes back to what Wendy was saying with the early onset of the internet. What we're really looking at is the same thing as the printing press, the fact that those books were able to move throughout Europe and any interested scientist was able to see and access this material, and if they were curious enough and clever enough, they could solve where the planet Ceres was and become famous overnight. Now we've all been isolated from that. That's really, really hard to do today, despite the growth of information technology. So there's something really odd going on there, that a 23-year-old would struggle to engage with the science we're talking about in this way. And that's largely because that information has now been locked down in very few companies, and access to those things is locked down. This is terrible for science as an institution. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. It's good for individual scientists, it's good for discoveries, but it's appalling for science. And there's a big difference between scientists and science. But the positive is, as individuals, we can contribute again. I'm doing enormous amount more science as an academic now than I could before, because I can use these tools to engage with different materials and search much better than I was able to do. But that's not restricted to just me. That's true of the 23-year-olds in this room again, right? And we need to make sure that that's the story that's coming out, because it's too much now about big things. I mean, CERN is an amazing achievement, but as you said, it took a decade to pull that together, right? And 10,000 people on the final paper. So that's science at a scale that has gone quite a long way beyond what Gauss was able to access. But what this can mean for individuals is getting back to doing science at a scale that I think was also mentioned, importantly by Alison, that you actually want it to be the experts who are working on the ground who care about the problem getting access to these capabilities. And this technology gives us that chance. And that's why it's a revolution, because it's an information technology revolution. But we have to be very careful, because just as Wendy was saying, information revolutions have a tendency to concentrate. And that's very, very problematic for India, countries that don't have access, for Europe, for a number of places that don't have access to those companies that are dominating on the information technology space. And I see that as probably the biggest threat to us moving forward as a society, unpicking exactly what Wendy was talking about, the recovery of that independence, that vision of the internet as a way of individuals communicating and participating, rather than an entity that is dominated by a few large entities.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, Priya, go ahead, please. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so I think that was great, Neil, also. Thank you. Kind of a different angle I'll bring is something echoing what some others have said on this panel, which is I think that in sort of engineering and scientific discovery, some of the things that really AI gives us is it's scalable, it can run really fast, and in principle, it can run 24/7. And on the one hand, if not done right, that is absolutely terrifying, right? If you do things at scale incorrectly, unsafely, unfairly, in an unaligned way, that is terrifying. But if we're able to sort of by design ensure that, AI is kind of working in a way that we want it to, then in a way that is physically feasible, that is safe, that is responsible, etc., then I think this is game changing, right? Because again, kind of reflecting on power grids, right now in power grids, things are incredibly manual. So even though we think of it as this engineering system that in principle could be optimized, in reality what's happening is that when we think about should a particular power generator turn on or off, someone sitting in the dispatch center is often making a phone call to somebody actually sitting at the generator to say, can you please turn this up or down? And this is happening in part because we just, again, aren't able to deal with the scale and complexity of the system. And on top of that, there are lots of things that we wish we were doing on these systems that we're not, because humans can only act so fast. I am not able to act at a millisecond level to control a power grid. There are certain things that just need to happen much more quickly. And so I think what kind of AI does in the sphere is on the timescales where we are able to do things today, it kind of shifts the role of the person there to not having to do things like make a phone call to dispatch power, but maybe look at kind of more nuanced things on the system and control it. And it also enables us to do things we weren't able to do, like put more renewables on the grid, which requires us to manage power grids much more quickly and much more scalably. which we don't do right now because we're locked into very conservative paradigms of making sure the power grid has plenty of infrastructure, plenty of buffer, kind of such that like a human can react to it. So I'd say, again, the things here are kind of the speed, the scale, and the 24/7 nature. Terrifying when done wrong, but I think really powerful when done right.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, there's so much amazing set of perspectives. The next set of questions I'll have, maybe go the other way around, so that's not the same way, or we could randomize as we like, is science connected to societal problems. We talked about, your opening statements about what you're doing. We talked about, taking the persona of the scientists or the engineers and what is this AI, what kind of tool is it, and so on. Now, when I look at societal problems, let's say pollution or climate change or health, education, or eradicating poverty or other sorts of things, I don't have an AI button that I press and I magically solve this. Clearly humans still have a role to play. How do you see the diffusion of fundamental discoveries in science? That the way it's happened in the past versus the way it could be in the future. Pick any societal problem that you're interested in. I assume Priya will pick about climate change and so on. And say, how should we think about climate change? You talked about power grids. Are there other aspects of climate change? Similarly, Bonnie, in terms of, I know your team has done wonderful work on Aurora, or rethinking how DFT should be done, or material science, or bioAMU, or each one of you for your various areas. How do you pick a societal problem? How should I, as a scientist or an engineer, or teams of these, think about navigating or thinking backwards from defining that societal problem and breaking that down into scientific or engineering problems? How should I collaborate? I'm trying to be as concrete as possible. If I would encourage you to be as concrete as possible. And also, since many of them may not know especially what you're doing, if you can take a specific example of what you're doing and help us understand. Right? So maybe, Priya, if I wouldn't mind, I can start with you first. How do we solve climate change?
Oh gosh, that is a much bigger question, but okay. So thinking about the broader climate change problem, which again, it's a very big challenge. It involves, I've talked about power grids, but it also involves decarbonization in other sectors. Some of them are energy related, like buildings and transportation. Others are related to land use, like agriculture and forestry. And then of course, this also requires large scale efforts to adapt to climate change, the effects that we'll face through kind of public health assessment, kind of disaster prediction, biodiversity monitoring, and all these sorts of things. So all of the problems I've mentioned, right, they're clearly not just sort of technical and scientific, which I think Shiv's question was also queuing up a bit, right? They're also deeply societal. So how do we break them down in a way that both kind of yields some tractability to how we think about the problem, kind of forms it and frames it in a way that kind of a scientist or engineer can grasp, but also doesn't lose the context and richness that can then cause further lines of scientific inquiry to be divorced from the actual needs of the on-the-ground problem. So I think there are lots of ways to think about this, but one kind of paradigm I'll bring this up in is the paradigm of benchmarks in machine learning. So benchmarks have been kind of a really big part of driving progress in AI and machine learning, where we basically kind of specify a sort of set of data, some tasks, some metrics, and then basically try to push forward progress in that setting. I think benchmarks have been incredibly powerful. They sort of have codified and kind of unified kind of efforts in a way that's really helpful. But I think also the way we've done benchmarks has been really limited in the past, in the sense that there's kind of a phenomenon where you kind of frame a problem that is hard to solve at a particular point in time. The field makes progress on it, and then people keep working on that version of the problem, even though in some sense we've exhausted the practical, actual progress on that version of the problem. I think we also tend to kind of write down metrics of success as being sort of singular. So did we get more accurate on this benchmark, for example? But in reality, when you actually deploy solutions on the ground, different things matter in different settings. So for example, maybe in a power grid example again, when we're trying to learn fast approximations to power grid optimization models, we want them to be fast, we want them to be accurate, and we want them to be robust to kind of uncertainties in their inputs. But how much each of those things matters differs depending on who the user is. And so if we evaluate our models based on just one metric, and we push to improve only that one metric, we miss the richness of comparison there, and we risk people all trying to drive forward progress on one thing, which is not actually capturing the scope and richness of the problem. And then I think the third thing that gets missed is when a benchmark is defined, we're obviously making lots of assumptions about a particular problem. We are kind of making some assumptions also about how one might then kind of integrate that into society, what the pathway to deployment is. And I don't know that we're particularly principled about kind of writing those down or acknowledging kind of what the limitations are of what this problem formulation and model development tells us. And that means is that when we've quote unquote solved the benchmark, we often then also don't know what the next step is. We again kind of get to this place where we're sort of divorced from reality. So I'm using benchmarks as sort of maybe like an organizing frame to think about some of this, but some of this isn't limited to just benchmarks. But I think to summarize, it comes down to kind of understanding that kind of progress is sort of a multi-metric thing where kind of it's not like one singular direction, but we're often needing to make progress in multiple directions, and we should acknowledge the richness of that. And we should kind of write down what assumptions and approximations we make about incorporate knowledge about what it means to actually deploy a solution. And we should also have a sense of when our approximations are kind of have reached their limit of usefulness and when it's time to kind of move on to a new formulation of the problem or something that better captures the richness.
Thank you. Yeah, would you like to take that?
It's a great question, and something that we've really obsessed about, particularly over the last decade, as it's been very clear that these technologies can come out. The public dialogues, I've been involved in public dialogues. Wendy mentioned one report, but we've been doing them again recently. So trying to refocus. I think we have to put our hands up and say, the set of societal problems that we're looking at, they're very old and long-standing, and they haven't gone away. And people are not stupid. They've been asking us to solve them for a long time. So if you do the public dialogue, you say they'd like solutions in healthcare, education, social care, etc. So then there's a major question, well, why haven't we done anything about it? And in particular with AI, because if you look at the report Wendy mentioned, we did public dialogue then, and they said, we'd love you to solve all those problems. The one thing we don't want you to work on is art. And the one thing we've made undoubted progress on without solving any of those problems is art. So in a very real sense, we're not listening to people and their problems as scientists. And I think that's partially this abstraction thing that Priya mentions. It's far easy to abstract a problem away into something we can solve and then shout about it. Well, to a large extent, that's not helping. That's not helping people in their regular lives. So what we've tried to do is switch the model and do something we call the attention reinvestment cycle. And we think we should be owning up as universities and saying we haven't done a good enough job on translating innovation from our labs to things that mean something to the, I don't know, a person on a bus in Hyderabad, right? Now, what that means to get through this benchmark problem that Priya is highlighting is you have to get down and dirty with the issues they're actually facing. So rather than telling them that we've solved a problem and deploying it for them as a solution, we're trying to flip the model. And in Cambridge with AI at CAM, and also the Accelerate Science program, and also learning a lot from my colleagues in Data Science Africa who've been doing this beautifully for 10 years, we're realizing you actually have to sit down with the people who are having the problem, listen to what the problem is, and start working with them to solve it. And ideally, and this technology is allowing that, ideally give them the tools to solve it themselves. So what we're doing at the moment with one of our programs, we're working with local authorities who've already formed AI clubs. We're listening to what their problems are. We're trying to then sit with them and propose a few things, but then often just introducing them to each other. We have reverse poster sessions where they show the poster session with the problem in, and most of the time they can solve each other's problems. Because with such a radical change in the information infrastructure, everyone is having the same problems everywhere. And I think the challenge is that the nature of those problems is not percolating up to the universities, to the big tech companies. And we're solving for things we can either make money for or we can get on the front page of Nature for. And that isn't helping, and that's leading to a rise in populism and a rise in people pushing back saying, what is this all for? Because it's not doing something for me in my daily basis. And I think with such a transformational technology, it is time to reassess that and start saying, how can we improve some of what we're doing this and actually address the problems that real people are having? And again, India is an amazing position for this. You have distributed universities across the country. You have a large number of challenges that are now offering new solutions through mobile phones, like my colleagues in Africa. That's why I find Africa so interesting. Not because I'm helping, not because they're helpless. They're solving their own problems in innovative ways that would blow your mind if you're sitting in the UK trying to solve those problems. And if we can transfer some of those solutions to the UK, then we have success.
And sorry, can I just interject really quickly? And at next year's summit, for exactly this reason, I would love to see the stage representing many more Indian scholars based in India talking about these topics as well.
Thank you, inspiring. Please.
Okay, it's working. So yes, in the ways I think how we have been defining problems, or rather picking problems which are existing on the globe itself. There's global hunger, there's energy, there's the climate change, the ones we have all been hearing all morning. Now, at CERN, we do have a section which is recently set up 10 years ago, CERN and Society. And we have a lot of problems that we go there, and then we convert them into competitions for everybody to participate. And typically, CERN being in Europe and access being easy, and like you, Priya just said that, Indian students are amazing, but they do not have the means to get there, right? They need to be empowered. They need also, but with the www first, and then with all the AI tools that are available, any student sitting anywhere can be linked to the problem. And this part is very close to my heart, I can tell you. I'm working a lot with students, high-level engineers, technicians, and trying to move towards capacity building. And that, I think, is our responsibility. We should not forget that. So any tool that is available today at CERN, except like superconductors, because it will be hard for us to ship them down here, but that knowledge had the ability to create a 28 billion market for MRI machines, imaging, and so on, cryogenics. So I want to link those and embed that into universities, schools, institutions, solving one problem together. Thank you.
If you can also add a little bit about that hadron therapy, I mean, we think of this fancy particle accelerators, huge loops,
right.
But how can it actually help solve?
Thank you. So you may have heard about radiation therapy for cancer patients, of course. You may have heard also about proton therapy, hadron therapy. This is the next big thing, which actually targets tumors without damaging the healthy tissues. And this has become go-to technology in the West, if I can say so, also in Japan. And there are 130 centers all over the world. And in India, where the concentration of cancer patients is much more, if you look at it if you look at a graph of the world, we need to make technologies for cancer patients accessible and affordable. So the good idea would be to come together and design something on the basis of the next generation of these particle therapy centers, of which do not exist yet, because all the 6 centers in the world are using technologies of 20 years ago. It takes that cycle, and AI can perhaps help us in accelerating that cycle and moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah. Pushmeet, if we could also add on, okay, you've solved protein folding, right? How can AI then help further discoveries, and then help us cure cancer, or one of these wonderful things that Demis keeps talking about, when are we going to cure cancer? When are we going to get on with it?
Yeah, so I think, like reflecting back on what Neil was mentioning as well. I think if you think about AI for science, and if you think about science generally, one aspect of science is basically making sense of the world. Really, a science for the sake of science, science for the sake of understanding. But then there's another aspect of science, which is science of understanding for the sake of solving problems. And I think in AI, we are seeing that AI is delivering on problems that are actually having impact. I mean, you mentioned AlphaFold, and AlphaFold is basically a root node problem, because solving protein folding does not just get you a Nature Prize, a Nature cover, or a Nobel Prize. It gets you more than that. The fact that 3.3 million people have used the AlphaFold database was a surprise to me. If you had told me this when we were starting the project, I would not have believed you. That there are 3.3 million scientists who have used AlphaFold. Those people are spread across the world. 180,000 of them are in India. These people did not have access to the cyclotrons which could have done the structural prediction for the samples they were interested in. Now they can, on the click of a button. And that really accelerates not just one particular area like drug discovery. It accelerates a whole span of things which require understanding of biology and biochemistry. There are people and scientists working here in India on understanding how do you improve soybean crops and make them resistant to fungus. How do you increase crop yields? All using AlphaFold. So in some sense, we are already seeing these scientific models have impact across socially important problems. In the case of weather and climate, like we were coming back to that sort of topic, our new generation of weather models, they are able to make predictions about weather in the short term, in 5 to 10 days or 15 days, in 1 minute, much more accurately than what a supercomputer would have taken a whole day to predict. And now these machine learning models for weather prediction are becoming so good that, in fact, in the last hurricane tracking and cyclone tracking sort of cycle, they were the model of choice and were able to literally save lives in terms of giving better and faster input as to what will be the cyclone and hurricane tracks. So AI is delivering. It is delivering sort of on problems which is going to have impact. Now, and then the final sort of thing, I don't think this work is sort of having impact because it cannot have impact by staying in a silo. It is having impact because these models have been made accessible. The 3.3 million people have used AlphaFold database. People can access those cyclone and weather predictions. Another example is our work on AI co-scientists and agents for science like AlphaEvolve. And this is where these agents are being used by scientists themselves. Terence Tao, who is one of the, I would say, arguably the best mathematician living on the planet today, he's using these AI agents to further his maths research. We are seeing AI co-scientists being used by scientists to come up with new hypotheses for problems like antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance is a key problem that is facing on the societal sort of scale, the health of the planet. So we are literally seeing these models having impact on these problems, and I think that's what will happen in the future. But again, this all will happen only if scientists have access to it. And this is not the job of one person or one institution. This is the job of society at large. Governments need to be involved. Academic institutions need to be involved. Social scientists need to be involved. Industry needs to be involved in making sure that this very powerful technology is given to people and scientists around the world.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
So,
just 30 seconds on that. that peaceful international collaboration is what has to come out of all our deliberations. And in principle, scientists who are also diplomats to democratize all the work that we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that message. Please, Alison.
And I definitely agree with that. What I'm going to say, though, is AI models depend on data. And one of the biggest problems in getting science to solve some societal problems is we don't have access to the right data. Working in medical imaging, it's already been touched on. If we restrict ourselves to the small open data sets and building AI models on that, we do not solve useful problems. We do a proof of principle, and there it stops, and then people go on to the next one. So then people say, well, provide access to all hospital data, please. Please just open the gates. And of course, you can't do that because of the different data privacy laws and the respect of health data. So what do? We've come a long way. When I first worked in international study on pregnancy ultrasound, this was in 2008, how in a research study, we have ethics approval for this, you shared data by USB stick. They were sent, my lab was the central center for this, and it was tedious. You had to triple copy everything, bring it together. Of course, things have moved on. But in healthcare in particular, it's sensitive data. And in other areas of science, we've also advanced in the way we can build models from sensitive data through things like federated analysis. We've come a long way. But the bottom line is we do need the individual science communities to decide what data they will share, provide access to, so that we can all collectively solve the right science problems. This may sound easy to a computer science. You should be able to just do it. It's complicated. It does require policymakers. It requires people to be able to provide that access under conditions and governance models. But it's very important for the future of using AI in science that we find better mechanisms to do that. It's not one solution either, but we work together so we can either share or provide access so we can build models that can really address some of these societal issues. And it's costly to do this. We need to understand we need to pick the problems together, a few problems to start with, to be able to come up with being able to do this, maybe with some then leading to some new standards and ways that scientists can work together globally. But that's what's holding us up at the moment.
So I just wanted to start by reiterating what Pushmeet said about democratization, so making models available, not keeping them behind closed doors so that people can use them, society can use them, governments can use them. Our model at MSR on the climate, so we have Aurora, which is a foundation model of the Earth's atmosphere. And that's able to, and as he said, there are a lot of machine learning for climate weather prediction models, and they're getting better and better. And what it does is enables us to forecast much faster than traditional methods. And one of the greatest benefits of that is preparation. So if societies, if communities, governments have access to these tools, they can predict when a major climate event is going to happen, we can prepare. And ultimately, that helps to save lives. So I think it's incredibly important that we continue to build on these models, we continue to make them accessible, and continue to grow in that area. The second area I wanted to talk about, the second societal problem I want to talk about was making medicines. India manufactures a significant proportion of the world's medicines today. And it's no secret that medicines are extremely expensive to make. It's very costly. It takes a lot of time in the lab. It takes many experiments, lots of human resources, scientists that are trying out experiments and oftentimes failing. So it costs billions of dollars. And once we get to clinical trials, typically we tend to fail more often than we succeed. The industry has made a lot of progress, especially with large molecules, so looking at antibodies and how those can treat disease. But of course, large molecules can't treat everything. So there's still a need for sort of traditional, very small molecules to treat as medicines. However, collaboration is really central and core to what we do probably in any tech company or in academia, working with industry. And some of the partnerships that we've had at MSR with pharma companies have really shown that there's a bit of an existential crisis when it comes to small molecule discovery, such that it's so expensive and takes so much time to discover small molecule drug candidates that oftentimes it's just easier and faster to just focus on the large molecules. But if we were to do that as a society, as industry, then that would cut out a significant number of treatments for diseases that people need access to. So it's incredibly important. This is a problem that we need to bring front and center, is how do we actually make drug discovery more accessible, more efficient? How do we find ways in which to reduce the time it takes and improve the probability of success when it comes to clinical trials? So that's a problem that we're working on as well. There are many bottlenecks along the way when it comes to making medicines. Essentially, every step along the way could be accelerated using AI. So working directly with the people involved, with the scientists, with industry is incredibly important, and making access to the cycles and iterations to find new medicines. One of the biggest problems and challenges that we have is not just how to design the molecules, but actually how to go and make them. You can imagine, a world where you could design a perfect molecule that might attach wonderfully to the target that you're trying to go after in biology. But then once you get to the lab, you can't actually figure out a way to make it. Or you can figure out a way to make it, but it's too expensive to make, which again drives up the cost of medicines. So I think AI is a great way to solve some of these challenges, and that is one area that we're working on as well, in particular for reaction prediction and synthesis.
Thank you. And as we come to the final stage, I'll do a quick lightning round on a couple of quick topics that I had finally. One is, as we are all sitting here, what skills does a scientist pick up? We think of first principles thinking, we think of, we talked about broader societal understanding, how to work with AI, disciplinary skills, collaboration both with people and AI models and so on. So a quick round on 30 seconds each, what skills should a person pick up? Anyone. So this will keep a random round. Whoever wants to pick it up, please.
Maybe I can start. I think one of the most important thing is understanding of these tools. So first, use them. These tools are not perfect. They will make things up. And you need to be aware when they make things up, because that's where the responsible use of this technology comes in. And one other sort of key point is, this does not mean that now that you have access to this AI tool, the expertise is not important. Expertise is even more important, I would say, now. Because in order to sort of really think about what is the right problem to ask, that requires deep expertise. So these tools, these AI systems are able to help you solve those problems. But who comes up with that problem? Who comes up with the right formulation of the problem? That requires deep expertise, and that requires deep interaction with how do you use these tools. So my advice to everyone in the room would be, first understand the deep problems that are going to have impact in your field of study, in the impact that you want to have in the world, and then use these tools, because they will give you superpower, but they will also have weaknesses, and try to discover those weaknesses. And I think those are the two very important skills that all scientists will need to sort of come up with.
Thank you, Pushmeet. Yeah, please. Yeah, Alison. Yeah, you go next.
I think the most important thing to do is be a team player. You don't have to be an expert at everything. You won't be an expert of everything. You've got your whole career to learn different things, and that's what makes it fun. So for me, the answer is, I think if all of us, when we started out, we had certain skills, and we've certainly evolved those with time. So it's about your ability to work with others, challenge them, so be a challenger, but be prepared to be challenged yourself. Contribute and take that forward, and that's all about working. That's what interdisciplinary scientists do. So that's, I think, come with something. Come to the table with your expertise, and then it will evolve with time.
Thank you. Thank you. please.
I really love that. As I said, I think collaboration is central to everything we need to do. And science is multidisciplinary. So you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you should surround yourself with people that have complementary expertise to you. I think the second skill that everyone needs is curiosity. So be curious about learning more, about asking questions, about understanding what the limitations are of the models that we're using, we're building, and ask questions of them.
Thank you. Archana?
I would say kind of investing in learning how to learn. Things are changing so quickly that it's not about kind of overfitting your knowledge to exactly how the latest and greatest thing works, but instead making sure you have the foundations to understand how to push that forward. And the other thing is, I think interdisciplinarity has come up, but I think that's not just about, from an education perspective, knowing things about multiple disciplines, but learning to think from multiple perspectives and have empathy for different ways people might approach a problem. Kind of briefly, I mean, I am, born and brought up in the US, obviously of Indian origin, and I think that for me in childhood, that ability to sort of things that other people were taking for granted, to see that there were two distinct perspectives or more than two distinct perspectives on those things, I think really for me made it a much richer way to navigate these assumptions and ways of thinking. And so I think there's a disciplinary version of that, there's a contextual and geographical version of that. Learn from multiple disciplines and learn to think empathically from all of those perspectives.
Yeah, last word with you.
So Bonnie said curiosity, which was going to be one of mine, and that was brilliant. The Pushmeet, what he's saying, I think curiosity drives you to play with these tools, but you want to do it within a context, something you understand, so you play them, and that's how you get the thing that I think you have to learn. That I think only PhD students towards the end of their time seem to pick it up, and I'm really worried about how we're teaching this, the skepticism. That's so important, the scientific humility. Thinking about 100 ways why the thing must be wrong. It goes all the way back to sort of Popper and conjectures and refutations. It's so, when I worked in industry, that's the thing I found was broadly absent, but I take for granted in my academic colleagues, skepticism and humility. But then I think the other one, passion. You will get all those things if you're passionate about solving a particular problem.
Thank you. So, in fact, everything has been said, but I would like to add two words. One is rigor, and second is logic and mathematics, which is an Indian heritage, I must say, so we should leverage that. You referred to deities, but I would say that mathematics and logic is, indented into...
Well, Ramanujan mixed the two together, didn't he? Yeah.
Think about it. So the possibilities are infinite, and we just have to leverage them. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Did you know we spent 1.5 hours talking and the time just went by? I just want to extend a word of wonderful thanks to all of my panelists here. And I hope this is just a beginning. And as we go forward, I urge you all to collaborate with us. As a funding body, we are having a program on AI for science. This is just the beginning, and we'd love to continue being in touch on what we can do together. And, Godspeed. Thank you.